What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to my channel, Hater at Cowboy Cinema. I'm Hater at Cowboy. Man, if you've been living under a rock for the last day and a half or so, you might have missed that Apple dropped a huge bombshell. The Mac Studio. It's finally here, folks. The machine that we have all been waiting for. This thing is absolutely mind-blowing. But what I want to focus on in this video is a little bit different. So we've all seen the renderings, we've all seen the specs, and they're nothing like we've ever seen. But what I want to talk about is the Mac Studio and Plex. Is the Mac Studio now the reference machine to build a Plex server? Let's discuss that. So first, let's take a look at some of the specs. Now, I've got my laptop here because there's so much stuff that just came out yesterday, so it's going to be hard to remember. So I've got my laptop here, and so we have two options for the Mac Studio. You have the M1 Max chip that's already been out. That's no slouch. That's an awesome chip. But then you also have the more expensive version, the M1 Ultra chip, which just blows anything we've ever seen out of the water. So let's briefly go over the specs. So the Apple M1 Max chip has a 10-core CPU with 8 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores. It has a 24-core GPU, a 16-core neural engine, and 400 gigabits per second memory bandwidth. The Apple M1 chip, the Ultra chip, has a 20-core CPU with 16 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores, a 48-core GPU, 32-core neural engine, 800 gigabits per second memory bandwidth. Just absolutely insane. And for memory, the M1 Max starts at 32 gigs and you can upgrade it. It's configurable to 64 gigabits, or 64 gigs, I'm sorry. And then with the Ultra chip, it starts with 64 gigs and is configurable up to 128. For storage, the M1 Max starts with 512 gigs and is configurable up to 8 terabytes. That's crazy. And the same for the Ultra chip. It starts with 1 terabyte and is configurable up to 8 terabytes. Now on video support, you can support up to 4 Pro Display XDRs and 6K resolution at 60 Hz with over 1 billion colors. That's beyond anything that we can do with the MacBook Pros, which has always been frustrating to me. And all this is supported over USB-C, and it also has support for one 4K display over HDMI at 60 Hz and over 1 billion colors. So the M1 Max chip provides 2.5 times more faster CPU performance, up to 3.4 times faster GPU performance, and up to 2.2 faster machine learning. Now, what I want to get into is this stat: up to 9 streams of 8K ProRes video playback for the Max, the M1 Max. The Ultra chip just basically doubles everything, because what they did with the M1 Max chip is they basically fused them together, so you're getting double the performance, literally double on everything, and it's just absolutely crazy. So the M1 Max chip can support up to 9 streams of 8K ProRes video playback. So if you double that, the Ultra chip can do 18 8K streams. That's insane. I don't know anybody that even has the content to be able to do that. I mean, it just doesn't exist yet. I don't know who would need to do that. But it's very interesting when it comes to Plex. Now, I know all these statistics and charts that Apple have been showing us have absolutely nothing to do with Plex, but it does. So if you go and look at the specs on Plex's website, or the minimum requirements on what a Plex server needs to run, it's not very much. You only need a couple gigs of RAM. You don't have to have a huge hard drive. I would encourage you to get an SSD if you're going to be, running your Plex server. That way you'll have the best performance. And then, it's not very hardware intensive. But the fact that you have so much headroom on this Mac Studio is just absolutely wild because you can do so many things with this new machine. For instance, if you're the type of person that likes to watch 4K content locally on your own network and you're using something like an NVIDIA Shield, then your Plex server really doesn't have to do anything, because if you're ripping your media 1-to-1, then the NVIDIA Shield can play, direct play everything. It can do Dolby Atmos, it can do DTS:X, it can't do Auro 3D yet. Maybe one day in the future. I don't know, maybe it can. I don't have any Auro 3D material and my receiver isn't Auro 3D capable, so I don't really know for sure, but I don't think that it can. I don't think it supports that. But if you're doing 4K content 1-to-1 and you're using an NVIDIA Shield or an Xbox Series X, it can direct play that. It doesn't have to do anything. However, if you're using another Plex client that can't support 4K and maybe you need to transcode 4K, which I wouldn't recommend, but let's say you needed to transcode 1080p or 4K, this new machine is going to handle that without a hitch. Now, some people have gone to the extent of going and buying an NVIDIA Quadro P2000, which is a super high-end card. It costs probably like $400 or $500, maybe even more now with inflation. But what you can do with that card is you basically get unlimited streams and transcodes, because your CPU, depending on the CPU that you have in your computer for your Plex server, if you're running a Plex server on an older machine, an older CPU, you may not have a lot of headroom to transcode stuff. So a separate GPU card comes in handy because it's specifically designed to handle multiple streams. And Plex has an option in its software that allows you to use hardware acceleration, which means it can use a different GPU on your system to transcode and to basically have an unlimited amount of streams. So, and there's people on YouTube that have, done benchmarks, and you can get up to 20, 30, 40, sometimes 1080p streams. Now, I don't know anybody that would ever need to do that for a pro, like a consumer like myself or someone like you that's watching this that uses Plex. I highly doubt you're going to need to use 40 streams or even half that. The most streams that I've ever used at one time was probably 4 to 5 people coming from my server, and my computer I built myself. Which brings me to my next point. You can't build a computer that will match the level of this Mac Studio. You just can't. There's nothing that compares to the Mac Studio, and you won't be able to go out and buy components that will match what this thing can do. So another reason why I think that this Mac Studio is going to be the standard when building a Plex server. If you want to build the best Plex server that you can, the Mac Studio is going to be that's it. It's in game. There's nothing else that you can buy that's going to give you the best Plex experience with that. So if we think about this, obviously, if you get the Ultra chip with the Mac Studio, it supports up to 18 8K streams. And again, that has nothing to do with Plex, but if you think about that, if you think about the bandwidth that is required to stream 8K content, which I don't know where you can find that. There's videos on YouTube that people have recorded in 8K, but that's not the same as a blockbuster movie with a high bit rate in 8K with Dolby Atmos. The bandwidth that it would require is just astronomical. So you're not going to find anything probably in the next 5, 6, 7 years that can even max out that chip. But if you think about how much headroom that you have, think about how many streams you can do with 1080p and transcoding. Because as powerful as this chip is, even the M1 Max chip, like to be able to do 9 8K streams, you've got so much headroom to do now 4K streams and 1080p streams. But you still have to consider the caveat, because being able to stream something on Plex or being able to serve up data to your friends and family remotely, it's not just reliant on the CPU and the GPU. You also have to think about your ISP, your internet service provider. Your server, your computer still has to upload that movie, and then your friends have to download that movie. So there's a lot that goes into that. If you have a very slow upload speed, then you're not going to be able to get 4K. Even if the computer itself, the CPU and the GPU can handle it, if you're serving up media to different parts of the country, different parts of your city, different parts of the world, that's going to be very heavily reliant on your ISP. So if you have a max of 15 megabits per second upload speed, but you're trying to serve up a 4K movie to a friend and it has a bit rate of 45 megabits per second, obviously that's not going to work. But if you do have the bandwidth, if you have fiber optics, and you have a Mac Studio machine, that's in-game. I mean, you have your own Netflix server that can rival Netflix. So this is something that's very interesting. I'm not able to buy one of these right now. I don't have the money to. I just got a MacBook Pro with the M1 chip that's absolutely stellar. I love it. I got that last year. And I just built a new Plex server back in, I believe it was 2021. Yeah, I think it was 2021. So I'm not in a rush to build a new Plex server, but if I do, when I do, I'm strongly considering getting one of these Mac Studios, because like I said, you can't build this. You can't say, you know what, I don't have the money to buy the M1 Studio, so I'm just gonna build something comparable in parts and cheaper. It's not possible, because we've seen the statistics, we've seen the stats. This Ultra chip just destroys Intel. And I like Intel. I still have computers that have, my computer that I built is based on an Intel chip, but this is just something else, folks. Like you can't beat this. And again, this is also interesting because of Plex Watch Together. I think this is really gonna help out Plex and its Watch Together feature for those that are going to go the route of buying an Mac Studio and putting a Plex server on that machine. Again, it's still going to be reliant on your ISP, but I can't stress enough that there's just so much headroom that you have with a machine like this and with Plex. Again, Plex doesn't require near anything what this machine can do as far as the components that you need to start the Plex server. But again, there's so much headroom, and you'll basically be future-proofing yourself, because when 8K does come out, whenever that is, you're set. I mean, this machine is probably gonna last you, it could last you 10 years, easy, as long as you take care of it. And I mean, I don't see that, I mean, I don't see this machine, wearing out. I mean, my MacBook Pro that I have, I've never heard the fans come on, ever. I don't even know what it sounds like because I've never maxed it out. So the fact that they built this Mac Studio the way that they did, I mean, it could last you 10 years, literally. So if you get one of these machines, you are definitely going to be future-proofed. And when 8K comes out with Plex, if Plex does support that, which I'm sure that they will, and I'm sure that that's going to take a lot of bandwidth, even on your home network. And the NVIDIA Shield, which is pretty much the standard for a Plex player, I don't even think that thing can handle 8K. Maybe it can, I don't know, I'll have to do some research. But let's also take a look at the ports, because that's important too. So on the ports, we have 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports on the back. You have a 10 gigabit Ethernet port, 2 USB-A ports, and 1 HDMI port, and a 3.5 headphone jack on the back. And then on the front, you have 2 more Thunderbolt ports. So another reason why this is the ultimate Plex machine, because even if somehow you do manage to max out, if you're going to be hooking up external hard drives to this, to store your media, not only are you getting super fast speeds with Thunderbolt 4, even if you do somehow manage to max out the ports, you can always hook up a hub and just get even more ports. So, and then you still got 2 USB-As. So you get 6 Thunderbolt 4 ports, 4 in the back, 2 in the front, and 2 more USB-A ports. Again, in-game. I can't wait to see the benchmarks that people are going to be doing with these machines, to see what they're going to do. And personally, I don't have a Plex server on a Mac. I've never used a Mac for that. I've always had Windows. But I think my next Plex server, once I outgrow the one that I currently have, if I have the funds, I'm definitely gonna buy a Mac Studio. In addition to being a content creator, it's just gonna be an all-in-one machine, and it's just gonna be so great to have a machine that, basically one machine, I can get rid of all my other computers, which I won't. So the Mac Studio is just an all-in-one machine, because not only can you use this for content creation, for those of us that are on YouTube and are content creators and providing content to people like you that are watching this, but then if you want to go even further and start do editing and Plex and stuff like that, I don't see anyone that's going to actually legitimately max out the power that this thing has, unless you're like an actual movie studio and you're using this to render all kinds of crazy, special effects and green screen and whatever. This is pretty much in-game status. So it's going to be interesting to see how people use these machines and the benchmarks that are going to come out of it. So guys, let me know in the comments if you're going to pick up a Mac Studio, if you've already pre-ordered one. What are you going to use yours for? Are you going to be using it for Plex? Are you going to be using it for content creation, or just general usage, which seems highly overkill? But again, future-proof yourself and your equipment, and you will be set for the next probably 10 years, if not more. All right, guys, well, as always, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already, and hit the bell notification so you know when I post new content. As always, I will see you guys in the next video. I'm Haterade Cowboy, and this is Haterade Cowboy Cinema.